everybody. We are live. I think we're live. Welcome, welcome to the Harmony and Humanity podcast, where we are all about highlighting the common ground we all share, inspiring conversations that lead to real world harmony and understanding. So, your hosts are Amethysta Herrick. Hello, Amethysta.
Hi, Jasmine. How are you doing?
So good. How are you?
I am doing okay. Trying to find the live thing on TikTok. Not doing well,
Oh,
but we'll see what happens.
few little technical whoopsies, but that's okay.
We're gonna have
And
plenty of
normally
them.
we are joined by Dr. Lino Martinez. He's got a very busy schedule recently, so he's
Yeah,
going to have to cut back the times that he's hanging out with us. So at the moment, I think is it once or twice a month. I think he's able to join at the moment.
I think we're looking at no more than about once a month, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
we were
it is a
thinking,
bummer. We love Lino,
yeah, but maybe we can like
but
rotate
also,
around, bring some of our friends
yeah,
in.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. If anyone's got any ideas of someone who you'd love to have a chat with us on the show, that'd be really cool. We've
Yeah,
got some people in mind that we're reaching out to jump in on some of the episodes. Anyway, we're that's a whole nother thing. So Amethyst to Lino, usually Jasmine, today, hello. We are transgender humans combining science, spirituality, and lived experience, all with the purpose of showing that we have much more in common than what separates us. And today we're going to be talking about sex and gender in the classroom. Do kids need protection from gender ideology? Because it's a really important topic right now, given the political climate and given all of the, protect our kids stuff that's coming out. And given that us trans adults were once trans kids, I think it's probably a really important thing to talk about.
yeah.
So we'll happily go on and ask each other loads of questions about it. But if you're joining us live, we'd love to make it interactive. Ask us questions as you go along, interact, put your bits of story in there as well. We'd love to see it because you have the power to drive the stream in any direction that you want. If you are catching the replay, leave your thoughts in the comment section below and let us know of any topics that you'd love to hear us talk about as well. But for now, let's get into this topic.
Let's
So,
do
Amethysta,
it.
you thought it was particularly important to talk about this in the current climate.
I
What are your
did.
thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think we both know, President Trump signed an executive order, right? That signed an executive order that says, the transgender, gender ideology in particular is harmful. And gender ideology being
Mm,
defined as, people who think that you can be a gender different from the sex assigned at birth. And so
mm,
now you have, now at least in the United States, we've redefined words that belong to science for really a political agenda.
mm,
This is being couched in terms of anti discrimination, interestingly, anti discrimination and saving kids. Because nobody's going to disagree. Like, no, if you go, should we put kids in danger? Nobody's going to go, well, yeah, give the little
yeah.
bastards, taste of the real world. Nobody's going to do that. So I totally understand, how this has been phrased, why it was phrased like that. But I think it's really important for us to discuss, are we really harmful? You know,
Mm.
are you, Jasmine, harmful for children? Seriously,
Am
what do
I
you
home?
think?
No. No. Goodness
No?
gracious.
Why not?
Well, my brain's on another whole thought train right now because
Mm,
I'm thinking that we need to define
sure.
what this harmful thing actually is. Because when people view like a trans person as harmful for kids, it's literally just our existence.
Right.
Like our existence is somehow harmful to them because it can confuse them. But the underlying thing of that is like, what is the gender ideology that we supposedly represent?
Right. Right.
And I think people will, I'll just go with the bastardized version that people spew out often. And that's like, oh, kids go to school and then they come back, they go as George and they come back as Georgina, and
Right.
they've had irreversible surgery. And it's like, what the hell? That's not happening anywhere. There's
In
no
junior high school.
schools.
Yeah. No.
It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Of course it is.
But that, what's the word? I mean, it's a straw man argument.
Mm-hmm.
They'll amp it up and play it into this massive thing that nobody would agree with, and then argue against that instead of arguing against the actual thing.
Right. Oh, totally.
It's a classic
Totally.
straw man argument.
It is. It is. Which, of
Mm.
course, I mean, that's a logical fallacy, but Donald Trump doesn't seem to care about logic from what I've observed. So, I mean, if you look at these executive orders, particularly the two executive orders that Trump signed that specify children in particular, one of them is to protect children, which he's now defining as people under the age of 20, because when you're 19, you're still subject to this.
Mm.
So the idea is that it's supposed to protect children from the idea that that it's possible to have a gender different from your sex. And maybe you remember, the way that Trump defined sex is that it had something to do at conception. So at conception, what gametes you might conceivably make. I love how it just used conception and conceivably at the same time. That was an interesting. So at conception, what gametes your body might make, that defines your sex, as well as your identity, as well as your identity for the rest of life. And so that's what gender ideology is not. Sorry, the gender ideology is the idea that that's not true. That it's not true that that at conception there is the possibility that your body might develop differently, that you might be born and you might have social pressures that cause you to interact with people in a certain way. They want to. Gender ideology is the idea that identity is not necessarily tied to genetics. I'm making this, in my own words, obviously. But the other one was to take, so that affected gender affirming care. So that's gender ideology.
Mm.
These two executive orders, one of them affected gender affirming care because gender ideology is dangerous, is harmful to children. Trump signed an executive order that says that gender affirming care under the age of 19, the age of 20, is will be illegal. So this is an executive order, not a law, obviously. But the other one was that gender ideology should be stripped from all education. And so that's more what we wanted to talk about today, whether or not it should be stripped out of education. So there's my definitions. What did you think about my definitions? Not very good ones, but.
I mean, what's coming to my mind is, I mean, what's the definition of ideology? Google.
It is
A
a
system
shared.
of ideas,
Yes.
ideals, especially one which forms the basis of economic or political theory and policy.
Right. Right.
Interesting, because based on that, the idea that sex is the same as gender and yada yada is more of an ideology than what the science actually says.
Yes. Well, yes. So I mean, now you're using logic, which. I mean, I suppose.
Oh, okay. Don't want to be burnt at the stake. I'm gonna be careful.
Right. But it's an excellent point. Like, why would, if you want to talk about ideologies here, an ideology is absolutely something that you can use for some sort of political movement. I don't think it's a political movement to say, I feel feminine. Personally, I mean, like, just the idea of gender ideology is somewhat ludicrous. Each of us has our own individual gender, and so the idea that this could even be an ideology, so something that a set of ideas that we all share, so that we share a sense of culture, a sense of what did you say, economic and political
Yeah. Korean
commonality
policy.
policy. The idea that we that they that there could that this could be an ideology is even somewhat of a contradiction in terms. Another logical
Mm.
fallacy, but clearly the conservatives aren't thinking too hard about that. So,
Oh dear.
what are your thoughts so far?
Well, I guess covering what it is, the ideology really is just talking about sexuality, talking about gender, talking about the differences between those, between gender expression, and allowing kids to understand that those things are different. And if they feel like they have a mixture of these things, that's totally fine. If
Right.
they feel like they fit these definitions of things, that's totally fine as well. All it is this fear that by them knowing that, they're going to be confused. That seems to be the
Um,
main thing.
I, I think I disagree with that.
Okay.
When, and I disagree with that because what this is, at least in my opinion, you don't have to
Yeah.
agree with this, but in my opinion, what these executive orders have done is codify Christian ethics. That
Mm.
it's not it's harmful. It's harmful because it goes against the religious right and their idea that the Bible necessarily supports the idea that there are only two sexes, which means only two genders, because biologists have never equated sex and gender. That's why there are two different words. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not an appeal to science, and it's got a pseudoscientific kind of sound to it. I mean, it's really pseudoscientific, but that's not because it's really scientific. It's because it comes out of the Bible. I think it's an appeal to Christian ethics, and it's harmful to the religious right that somebody would teach otherwise. I mean, I think
Mm.
there's no other words for it.
So we're saying that's the underlying thing, like the protect the kids from confusion is kind of the appeal that they're having to appeal to the masses. But
Yeah.
underneath that, it's actually those underlying values that they're wanting to stick to. And
Yes.
mm,
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I don't think we're really looking. This is the straw man. The straw man is that we're
yeah,
we're not talking about Christian ethics. We're talking about pseudoscience. And and I've brought up before, like, people don't like to attack science. Like, if you
yeah,
go, do you remember I brought up the phrase ethically unassailable, right? If
mm,
you have something that's sciency, it doesn't even have to be that sciency. But if you get something that's sciency, people go, "Oh gosh, that sounds really sciency. I better not attack that." But ethically unassailable is what that means. Ethically, and so now again, we're talking about the idea that this is Christian ethics being attacked in
mm,
some way. That you look at phrases in the Bible, verses in the Bible that supposedly support the idea that homosexuality is, as Leviticus 18:22 would put it, an abomination, as it's
mm,
been related to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and various other bits in Leviticus. And it's, there's a lot of biblical scholarship behind the idea that
yeah.
that the Bible does support heterosexuality, but then there's a lot of scholarship around it that goes, no, that was never even a concern. So,
Mm,
which just one, I just want to throw this out here because it always kills me when you have when you look at the story of Noah. So one of the earliest examples that Christians will use, they'll say the story of Noah in Genesis. Noah gets drunk. It's a festival. It's a Jewish festival where you're supposed to drink. Somehow wine
mm,
figures into it, and I forget what the festival is, not being Jewish, not having grown up Jewish. The end. But he gets drunk and he goes and he falls asleep with no pants on, like you do. And his son Ham comes in and sees his nakedness, and this is supposed to be code for has his way with Noah. it kills me that there are Christians who will go and see God sent Ham off to the land of Nod, put his mark on him, sent him off to the land of Nod because you're not supposed to be gay. And I go, well, what about rape? Is that cool? Like, is that a problem?
Mm.
Like, shouldn't that be a problem? Incest? Is that a problem? Apparently not. The problem is that, you know, Ham was male, Noah was male. That's the problem. Nobody cares that this is essentially date rape.
Mm.
Like, shouldn't we be concerned about that part of it? Like, shouldn't we really go, let's think about this? Anyway, that was way off topic, but Christian ethics. There's a lot of scholarship around it. And that's one part of the scholarship that I just wanted to go, that doesn't seem very scholarly. Like, we're not thinking very hard about this.
So morally, the most morally questionable parts and outcomes of what they're advocating for typically are not said out loud. They don't say those bits out loud.
No.
But let's just talk about the result of stripping away gender ideology, which
Right.
is literally just trans people don't exist.
Yes.
And it's bad to be trans. If anyone thinks that, homosexuality isn't next, it is.
Right.
It's probably already,
You're fooling yourself.
taking the hit with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Project
Well,
2025
it
already. Yeah, right.
It already is, because anything that even mentions the word gay is being stripped from any public record over in America right now.
Right.
Like any federal things.
And we could go even further actually, because the Trump has also ordered that many books on diversity, have been be removed from at least from military libraries. And so this is not necessarily the queer community. This could be stories about about black people, about other minorities. Yeah. I mean, if you think that it's supposed to stop at gender, yeah, you're fooling yourself. Agreed. So.
Yeah. And that's the bit that they're not saying out loud.
Right.
But when they're removing all of these, like all the terminology and everything, like harmful terminology, which, by the way, a really funny one. You know the Enola Gay plane?
Yes, yes.
The first. So for people who don't know, the first plane to ever drop an atomic bomb was called the Enola Gay. Yeah. Pretty well-known plane. Public record of it was stripped.
It was
because
not.
It's got the word gay in it.
Oh my gosh.
It was so funny. But there's unintended consequences of doing that. That's just a particularly funny one. But that affects women, that affects black people, that affects anyone who is not a cisgender, heterosexual white man. Pretty much anyone who doesn't fall in that category is diversity. Yes. Anyone with a disability, anyone who has mental health concerns, like literally, it affects everyone. But that bit is the part that is quiet. They're like, oh no, this is only those. It's only those really out there trans people that are, doing these horrible things and yada yada.
And there's an intersection. There's an intersection there too, isn't there? You mentioned disabilities and mental health.
Yeah.
Isn't it possible for cisgender heterosexual white men to be disabled? To struggle with mental health? I mean, there's an intersection there. I mean, again, if you think this was going to stop, you're fooling yourself. So, can I ask you a question?
The unintended consequences of that, it's going back to a time where women were more easily controlled.
Right.
Black people knew their place, like all of that kind of stuff. It is going further towards that. But it's being justified because of things like the straw man argument of it's, we're transitioning kids in school, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
People, we can all agree, like even you and I, we could go, oh, that's ridiculous. We're not going to advocate for freaking kids going and getting gender affirming surgeries when they're
No.
bloody in school and like coming back and not having any conversation with parents because that's ridiculous.
Right.
Like, no trans people are advocating for that. But if they make you think that we're advocating for that, then we look freaking insane. And
Of
so it's so
course.
much easier to take those steps to strip away our rights.
Of course. Of course. Can I ask you a question then? Because this is
Certainly can. Certainly can.
because you've brought this up too. We've had a conversation. So common neuroscience says that our brains don't complete development before 25 years old. There's a debate on this, right? 20 to 25 years old, somewhere in there, your brain has completed development, and I have to put that in air quotes because our brain never completes development, right? I mean,
Neuroplasticity.
right? So,
But anyway,
but there you go. So the now cognitive science, psychology, and cognitive science, we know very very well that the ideas that we're exposed to, the behavior that we're exposed to before about the age of 8 or 10, 7 to 10, somewhere in there, become very firmly embedded in our understanding of the universe, our understandings of
mhm.
ourselves. So we there people have used the neuroscience argument to me to say, well, hey, what's going on? We can't allow gender affirming care because we have no idea who we are before apparently the age of 25. But we also know that before the age of 10, most of our patterns have been set. How do these two, like, these seem at odds with each other? Especially using the argument that says we couldn't possibly know fuck all before the age of 25, although we're going to be able to go off to war, we're going to be able to vote, we're going to be able to buy alcohol, drive a car with alcohol, drive and buy alcohol, drink the alcohol, drive home. So it's a ridiculous argument as well. But here's the other part. I mean, if we know that our patterns are established before the age of 10, wouldn't it be ridiculously important for us to explore it all before the age of 10? What do you think on that?
That is a massive freaking question. And before I get into it, I'm just going to have a laugh with Zoe. In schools, I thought we were doing it in prisons.
In prisons, in schools, there's like now corner gender affirming care, like in the strip mall down the road here. There's just a
Oh my
you can walk by,
gosh.
just pop in and go, hey, look, can I get a vaginoplasty, please? And they go, yeah, hang on. Jim, one vaginoplasty? Oh, one vaginoplasty. Okay, come on back. It's okay, bye.
Oh my gosh.
Stupidity.
Um, this is totally not relevant. I just want to give a heads up for
Yeah.
people joining us as well that we were having a discussion after our last episode where we were like, we kind of want to make this a little bit more like friends having a chat
Yeah.
because I think Amethysta, you and I, we kind of have these presenter modes that we go into.
We do, yeah.
We do. And then after the call, we'll chill and like chat for a while. And then we're like, oh my gosh, we're so much more free flowing and like going on
Yeah.
to random things. In the spirit of that, have a look how nice I've shaped my nail.
Oh, that is lovely. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Do you have
Oh my gosh.
light blue and white nails? No, they're all pink. Oh well.
No, I've got the different colors, but I didn't like
Yeah.
a bunch of them snapped off. So
Oh
they're
my
like not
gosh.
shaped very nicely. But these ones in particular, I'm like, I've been able to get that shape quite so nice. I'm
I
very freaking excited about this. Oh,
I am very happy for you, sister. That is awesome.
me too. Me too. People have been complimenting like the color of my nails, and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, look at the shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh dear.
I'm with you.
Very happy with that.
And as long as we're talking about that, I got my other nostril pierced on March 19th, so a little more than a month
Oh,
ago, right? So a
yeah,
little more
yeah.
than a month ago, and that's feeling much better if anybody cared, because it was
Real.
healing kind of funny, but now it's healing much
Yeah.
better. So I'll quit
Very
putting
nice.
my finger like in my nose in case that makes anybody
Oh my
vomit or
goodness.
something. But
Yeah. Oh
so
gosh.
there we go. So we've gone through our fashion. That's good.
Yes. But then, okay. So
Okay.
this is because, yeah, there's an interesting intersection here between the ages of 0 and 7 is when a lot of the early experiences like shape our identities in certain ways. They shape our values, they
Mm-hmm.
shape the way we interact with people, our attachment styles, like
Yep.
all of that kind of stuff
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really formed in those times. It's also the time where, like, part of the reason that that period of time is so profound is because there's nothing for us to contrast it against. And it's also the period of time where it's predominantly pre-language. We're learning language as we go along. We're learning little
At
bits and
7.
pieces. Traumas that happen before the age of 7
Okay.
are typically a little bit more difficult to come to terms with and to
Right.
process
Right. Right.
because we don't have language to describe what has happened or to put our logical understanding of it because we didn't have it at that time. So there's that. There's that side of it. Is there anything that you wanted to say on that? Because I noticed some facial expressions.
No. 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 No.
Okay, okay.
I was gonna. I guess I was gonna say. I think it's more than language, but you're probably gonna get there because that logical faculty that you're talking about that grows somewhere between 7 or starts developing somewhere between 7 and 10. You said we didn't have that at the time, and I think you were
Mm,
talking about language, but I would also say this more logical
yeah,
faculty, this more
that's an
integrative
important aspect too.
faculty. So and
Actually.
so we have patterns. What's that? Yeah, are you okay?
Oh no, keep going. Keep
Oh,
going.
and so these patterns impress themselves upon us really easily because we don't have something that can question it. So we have
Mm,
lack of experience, we have lack of language, but we also have the lack of a logical faculty even to question it. And
yeah.
so that's why it's
Yeah.
so important. I've got an idea on why the religious right would want to keep gender ideology particularly out of elementary school. And that's
Mm,
because if you get exposed to the idea that gender is something you define, if you get exposed to the idea that the Bible is not a scientific document, it's going to be much easier for you to believe that later on. In other
yeah.
words, if you're indoctrinated with the Bible from before 7 to 10 years
Mm,
old, it's going to be much more difficult for you to turn away from that. And so I'm going to go
mm,
back to the whole idea of Christian ethics. Not only are Christian ethics what's being pushed here, but it's being pushed at an early age because the earlier you indoctrinate, the more difficult it is to turn away from it and the more painful it is to turn away from it. You work with this all the time. I'm talking about this all the
oh yeah.
time too, that it's so difficult to change your identity once you've hit, 20, 30. So we use this sort of false argument that we don't know who we are until we're
Mm,
25 years old, but we know exceptionally well who we are by the time we're 10 years old because all of our patterns have been established. Are you,
yeah, yeah.
are you looking up like, what are you pulling out a reference?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to find the
Do you
what's
want to
it?
shape?
It's not.
I can start showing my fingernails if you want. We can do we
Oh
take a
my
break
goodness.
or
I don't know what page that was on, but it's just the different ages of the
of cognitive development?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I probably could have found it on Google quicker, but I thought it was right there. but 0 to 7 being the imprint phase, and
Yeah.
then 7 to 14 being the modeling phase, and then 14 to 21 being the socialization phase. That's off the top of my head. I think that's about right. Um, there's different stages of development at each of those. Up to the age of 7, that critical faculty is just not there.
Right. Sure.
Like kids are absolute sponges for information during that period of time.
Right. Right.
But guess what? They're not just sponges of information for trans people exist. They're also sponges of information for there's a person in the sky who's going to condemn you to hell if you don't
Yes.
brush your teeth.
The Bible is science. Right. Right. It's
Mm.
in, and it is indoctrination. I would call it indoctrination to
I mean,
make sure.
indoctrination, the definition of indoctrination, it's literally just a word that has a negative spin on information. It's like information that we don't want you to
Right.
consume or to have at this point is
Yes.
indoctrination.
Yes. Well, I would say, I don't know if I'd say that. I mean, it's giving somebody a
Mm.
doctrine, which now you can look that one up if you want to, but a doctrine which has to do with, it's like a model of the universe kind of thing. When you give somebody a
Okay.
doctrine, you make sure that they cannot
Yeah,
challenge a view of a universe. Okay, go
that's the
ahead.
core part of it. The process of teaching a person or group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically.
Yes, uncritically. Uncritically,
Uncritically.
because you don't have a critical faculty, right? Between 0 and 7.
Mm.
Huh. Hmm. Hmm.
So any information that you give to a kid before the ages of before the age of 7 is going to be uncritically regardless. You're
Right.
indoctrinating them to learn how to brush their teeth, to freaking tie their shoelaces,
Mm-hmm.
to learn that Santa is bringing them presents, to
Wipe
learn
their
blah blah
bum.
blah. It's
Yeah.
all of it. It's indoctrination if it's information that you don't want them to have. Like that's that's a hill I'll freaking die on because
I mean, I
it's
agree.
all indoctrination.
That is, yes, that is the connotation of the word. Absolutely agree. But because see, look at, I mean, Zoe's even bringing this up. Things she learned during that age in school, religion. Things she
Mhm.
didn't learn at that age in school, gender and sexuality. And Zoe, I imagine this has been a difficult process. When you finally get to a point where you go, wow, I'd love to challenge this. It's much more difficult when you have these patterns already established, and you go, oh no, those are bad patterns. I don't want to. I'm not allowed to be those patterns. And the worst part is too, at least in my opinion, because you didn't have a critical faculty that gave you reasons, you just know they're wrong. You don't know why.
Mhm.
Which,
Yeah.
indoctrination, lack of being able to attack it critically. So it's, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I understand why this executive order exists, but if
I
we go ahead,
just want to bring the word choice out here real quick
do
because
it.
the the choice to decide what you want to integrate as part of your identity is the most important part here.
Yes.
When people are teaching about gender ideology, we're saying, hey, the majority of people are generally are cisgender and heterosexual. We know that based on statistics, that the majority of people fall into this. There are also some people who are, cisgender, which means this, and they are attracted to these people, and blah, blah. So that's, a thing that happens as well. When you are saying that, that's not confusing someone. What's actually confusing someone is saying the only people that exist are cisgender and heterosexual. And then when someone isn't that, they are so confused. I'm speaking
Right.
from my own experience here. And I'm
Right.
sure people watching at the moment and Amethyst, you could probably relate. I grew up going, oh, these, like, I'm attracted to to guys, and I am a guy. And so, what does that mean about me? I don't know that that's a thing.
Must not
All these
exist.
people, yeah, it must not exist. Like, what does that mean for me? I must be an absolute freak. There must be something wrong with me. Oh,
Yes.
religion says that guys who are attracted to guys go to hell. I'm like, oh shit. So that's like a really horrible thing. I've got all those things running through my freaking head
Right.
as
Right.
a kid.
Right. Right.
And I also felt super alone. And like there was nobody else on the planet who understood my experience. And that was the most confusing thing of all.
Sure. Sure.
If I had known that that was actually okay, that people exist in that space, and I knew that there was acceptance for that, I could have gone, oh, okay, that matches my experience more.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel much more comfortable. I know that, I've got acceptance in people that match that. Learning about those things does not make you gay or trans or anything. It just allows you to recognize your experience.
Right.
That's all it does.
Right.
Because there's plenty of cisgender heterosexual people that learned about gay people being a thing or existing. Maybe they had like a gay relative or something, and they didn't turn out gay. They went, oh, those people exist, but my experience matches this, just like we freaking did.
Right. Right. So now I have one more question. Maybe this is more of a rant.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's my thought. Both of us grew up and we were taught. I mean, it was less so. I hate to use the phrase "in my time," but I got to use it because
In
you
my day.
right. You are. Hang on, my dentures are getting a little loose, but um, the point I was going to go for here is that we both grew up with this sense of it was a cognitive dissonance because we were taught these people don't exist, or at least they couldn't exist, and then we observed them. And so I guess I would question when you look at especially phraseology that says gender ideology is harmful to children. Is it more harmful to teach them that there are things that many things exist, or that some things they could be don't exist? Because I'd
Mm,
say giving somebody a model of the universe that doesn't include them is
yeah.
way more harmful. Like if you want, I mean, for what it's worth, I don't think that we're looking at, a political party that's like, well, I don't think they're saying we want healthy people. I think they're saying we want people who are going to vote, Republican ultimately.
Mm,
But
yeah.
I would say if you were trying to do this from the standpoint of how do we make children as safe as possible, how do we make sure that children grow up to be, you know, valuable members of society, make sure they don't get this big, huge cognitive dissonance between the ages of 0 and 7 when they are most vulnerable to it. Rant's over. Hang on a second. Let me step
One bit
off
I
my
want to add
soapbox.
to that,
Okay.
there are things that are accepted uncritically during those ages just because the critical faculty isn't developed.
Agreed. Yeah.
So we know that's a thing.
Yeah.
But there is also a felt sense of identity we've seen as early as the age of 2
Yeah. Yes.
that
Yes.
people will look around and go, ah, this group of people, I relate to this group of people more than this group of people.
Yes. Right.
And that is an inner felt sense of identity that we do not know how to measure. There is
Right.
no way, like, gosh, we're trading rants here, aren't we?
Well, yes.
Gosh. Hi, Morgan. I just saw the
Yeah.
wave.
Here, actually, let's hit a couple of comments because I want to say, I'm looking at something from, I hope I say this right. Savo Suchamilla is what it looks like. And I'm Suchamilla, maybe if it's a Spanish, but it is no joke. This is the first Twitch comment I think I've ever seen. I just want to throw that out there. So I just want to say hi.
Welcome, Twitch.
Thank you so
Hi,
much for.
Twitch.
Yeah, wow. Here we are on Twitch. Hi, Morgan.
Yes.
Also, Zoe also brings up the religious stuff was easier to question as she had an interest in science. Gender and
Mm,
sexuality was something I didn't really know about until I was late teen, young adult. You
mm,
know, I think that's getting better today too, for what it's worth. I mean, I don't I didn't really have a class in gender or sexuality, or even for that matter, like safe sex and stuff. Like that came in after I left high school,
yeah.
presumably, because I don't remember doing it. And I was a very good student, and I probably would have, you know, when you're like in high school, the first thing you want to learn about is sex, right? You're like, how do I get
Mm.
it? How do I do it? At the very least, how do I get it? So, in any event, I
How
think
is
that's
that
better now.
topic?
What?
Oh, I'm lost. Um,
Wait, oh, see, old age does that to you. When I'm reminiscing about high school, like it was like 160 years ago. I mean, it's hard to remember some of that stuff.
oh my
But
gosh.
I didn't get like a sex education class in high school.
Yeah.
I mean, did that make
Now,
me
you know what?
better or worse?
I'm going to say I did when I was about, this would have been when I was 14.
That's
So
not
I
bad.
was already, yeah, it's like kind of getting towards the end of like the socialization kind of phase. But
Yes.
I was figuring myself out and getting more of a sense of identity and whatnot. At that point, I think sexuality was clearer to me for, a few years at that point. And I just started becoming more comfortable presenting closer as myself. So,
Mm-hmm.
I was very effeminate looking. I was like growing my hair out and I was wearing makeup and more like ambiguous kind of clothing, yada, yada,
Right.
around that time. And that's the first time I had ever seen the school say gay people exist.
Get out of town.
First
At
time I ever
at
saw that.
14. At 14.
Hmm.
Can
Yeah.
can I address a comment really fast, by the way? Hold your thought, please,
Yes.
because this is an important question. So Savo says, just to know I'm underage, so do I have to leave the stream or can I stay? I'm going to tell you I did not mark the stream as 18 plus. We
Hmm.
are not going to talk about topics that I believe are adult only. That being said, I don't know the terms of service for Twitch, and I'm going to say I don't know. I cannot answer that question, and I'm not going to answer that question.
Well, you know what? I
What?
want to touch on that for a moment
Please.
because gender ideology across the world, like the things that we're talking about, is being considered not appropriate to talk to kids about.
Right. Whoa, it's the whole
So
stream, right?
that's what the whole stream is about. But there's a difference between something that's morally and ethically correct and laws
Well,
sometimes.
yes. And that's
Oh
why I
my
said
gosh.
I did not mark the stream as 18 plus.
Yeah.
And if I did not mark the stream as 18 plus, then Twitch's terms of service, I suspect, would say that anybody can view it. And I'm going to go with Twitch, who is holding me contractually, liable for marking down whether or not somebody should watch this. So,
Mm. Well, to be honest, it'd be really good to have someone's perspective as well who is
yeah,
growing up in this period of time
right.
and is being exposed to all this political footballing stuff. So,
Yeah,
so yeah, I mean, I don't think this is what the whole stream is about. We don't believe that this is inappropriate to talk about in any way. We're not
right.
going into details of things, yada yada. Like,
In,
yeah,
in
it's
fact,
fine.
actually, if you don't mind answering, Savo, and please tell me if I'm saying the wrong name here, but if you don't mind answering, um, do you feel uncomfortable about us talking about this? Do you feel this should be a taboo topic? Do you feel it is a taboo topic? I'm curious, like what you've
Yeah,
experienced in your
interesting.
life. to find
Absolutely.
out, that and why you would even want to be here to see it now. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because I'll
Well,
go. Oh,
while they're, oh,
nope, go ahead.
what were you going to say?
Oh no, I
Okay,
talked.
I was just going to say while they're writing or whatever they're doing, um, my thought train. So yes, 14, that was the first time I ever learned that gay people
Yeah,
even
right.
exist. But my felt sense of identity, sexuality wise, didn't develop until I was maybe like 11. That's when I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I think I'm attracted to boys, blah, blah, blah. That's what I noticed.
Sure.
Prior to that, I didn't really have a sense of sexuality whatsoever. It wasn't something that was on my mind. I was a kid. I did not, it wasn't
Sure.
anything that ever came up. But I still had a felt sense of femininity from as early as I can remember.
Yeah.
And other people saw that from as early as I could remember
Right.
because of the bullying that I got literally from kindergarten of, oh, dead name is like a girl, ha ha ha.
Right.
And then all the slurs that they'll say and blah blah blah. People saw that before I did because I didn't recognize it as a thing that was incorrect about myself. It was just something that I aligned with, and
Yeah.
it's something that I felt an affinity with. That's literally it. So when it comes to gender identity, I mean, oh gosh, we'd have to dissect what gender actually is and all the bits and pieces of that. But it is literally at a baseline, it's how we identify within our social groups. And so for me, I would look at groups of like other little girls and I would go, oh, I relate to them and what they're doing. I'd like to go and bloody play and like skip rope with them and talk about random blah blah blah. I'd love to do that rather than what the boys are doing, like kicking the football around and being
Sure.
really rough with each other. I'm like, oh hell no. Like I don't want to do that. I want to
Right.
go hang out with them. They're being less crazy. Um, so that's just a little example of one of those things where I would look at these different groups of people and go, I relate to this group of people more. I kind of want to hang out with them, not with them. And that's me as a freaking 5-year-old.
Oh, sure.
You
Sure. This.
know?
Can I make a quick observation too? Because
Mm,
you said 5 years old, you felt feminine, but 11
mm,
year old 11 years old, you started to consider, patterns of reproduction.
mm.
That's a stilted way to say that, but run with me for a
That's a
moment.
really weird way to say
It was
that.
really, I know,
Amethyst to
it's
Herrick, the scientist. Yeah.
stilted way of saying. Here was what I was going to say. It's almost like you observed in your own life that gender and sex are two different things.
Almost. And that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make here
Right.
is that my felt sense of gender, sex, and sexuality, the three different things here,
Yeah.
my experience was those were different.
Yes. Yes.
So gender was very obvious to me. It was like the social norms, how I relate to people, how I feel about myself, like all of those types of things. That was the most obvious thing to me as soon as I started getting flack for how I was as a person,
Yeah.
how I
Yeah.
existed. As soon as people started telling me, oh, that's wrong, you were born with a sheeny weeny lemon squeezy. You were born with an outie, so that's wrong for you to behave in this way and to relate to that gender.
Right.
That's the only time where I felt that conflict because I was like, okay, so the way I naturally am is wrong.
Yeah.
And so I should be trying to change myself to fit in with this norm because someone
Yes.
who's born with the body that I was born with should want to kick the ball around with those guys and not skip jump rope with those girls.
Right.
And so that was a cognitive dissonance in and of itself because I'm like, hold on, my sense of identity doesn't match with this. But I ran with that. I was like, okay, okay, so what you're telling me is that because I'm born with this body, this is incorrect for me. I should be wanting to relate to these people. So I'm going to try my hardest to try and do that. I'm
Hmm.
going to try and put up a mask. I'm trying to act really masculine. I'm going to try and push that femininity down, but I have to learn what that is. I have to learn what are the parts of me that people are perceiving as incongruent with my body. Okay,
Right.
it's me being sensitive. It's me wanting to connect with people emotionally. It's me wanting blah, 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 like this big laundry list, right? Of all of these things. I had to learn what are those things that are inappropriate for my how I'm born and how can I shift how I behave to these ways. The main thing I'm wanting to get across here is that's not natural.
No,
That
you
is not
felt
natural.
right. You felt you needed to fix yourself. Was
Yes,
that not harmful? Just, to keep going back to
very
this.
harmful.
Yes, you felt, I'm sure that
It
felt like
was very
hell.
harmful. Absolutely, because I've been told the way that I naturally am is inappropriate, it's
Yes,
incorrect, and I need to be
wrong.
a different way.
Yes,
And so I needed to learn how the people behave that I don't relate to so that I
right.
can try and mold myself to behave like them so that I can be accepted, so that I can have love and acceptance and understanding.
And what a horrible pattern to have established by 7
Horrible.
years old that you need to change yourself in order to be worthy of love, to be worthy of acceptance, to be a worthwhile
Mm.
human. This is what we want
If
to
I
teach
hadn't
our
done
children?
so much therapy, if I had not done so much therapy and so much healing work, I would be bawling my freaking eyes out right now.
Oh, I
I
hear
can
you.
feel myself welling up a
Yes.
little bit
Oh, I hear
because
you.
that is what we are teaching kids if we say that your identity does not exist.
Yes.
You are erased, your experience is invalid, it's against God, it's blah, 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 blah. Is you're teaching people that how they naturally are is incorrect and wrong, and they're going to be punished for it. They're going to be
Right.
withheld love, nurturance, acceptance. Horrible, horrible, horrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
You're
those two.
just about to cry myself. I mean, don't you have to keep pounding on
Honestly,
him.
there's those two aspects,
Yeah.
and people come to terms with those things in different ways. Some people will go, oh, you know, my whole life I related to my mum, and then I was 6 years old and I saw my dad in the shower, and I went, wait, what? He has the same genitalia that I have. And it's like, oh, you've got the same thing that I do, but mum doesn't have that. And then some people will click at that point and go, oh, there's something, the sex here isn't matching the gender. And then they'll
Yeah.
have that incongruence from that point and realize some people will even have a felt sense of their own body and go, I feel like that, like this shouldn't be like this. We don't know exactly, there's not a one size fits all approach with how people come to grips with that understanding. I think there's lots of different ways that people understand that.
Yeah.
But trans people in general will have a pretty good understanding of the difference between sex and gender, one way or another, pretty early on.
Yes. Right.
And then sexuality, totally different thing. Totally different thing that we come to the understanding of a little bit later on. So, this sexualization of gender, like understanding of gender identity, ridiculous. It's not sexualized to understand what social groups you fit in with and how you feel about yourself. That's not a
Right.
sexual
Right.
experience.
No. No, agreed.
So anyway, I think we've got another comment that I would
We
really
do.
like to see.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you want to read it? Or you want me to get it?
Yeah. Can I actually, hold on a second, let me get it up uh, on
Oh,
the big
I
screen here.
thought you said this wasn't going to be sexual. Oh, okay. Sorry, on the big screen. My apologies.
Oh my gosh. Is that a horrible joke?
Thank you, everybody. I'll be here all week.
Terrible,
I know
terrible.
it.
Okay, so no, I don't feel embarrassed to hear you guys talking about this. It's why I came here in the first place. Um, this is very blurry for me. In Sicily?
Oh, do you want me to read it?
Yeah, because when I'm
Okay.
reading it on the
Oh,
YouTube, it's
right,
reading
because
to me.
you're not seeing the Twitch comments. All right, let me read it.
No, I'm not.
So this
Thank
comes
you.
from Savo, who says, "No, I don't feel embarrassed to hear you guys talking about this. I'm gonna, this is ladies, you ladies talking about this. It's why they came here in the first place. So Savo lives in Sicily, the bottom part of Italy, and sex and gender is a little overlooked in the classroom. It's a thing you
Mm.
typically learn. I think you typically learn. I'm seeing at the base, and I'm unsure exactly what that means, but how kids are made, what is consent, just that. And just so you know,
Yeah.
Savo is 14 years old, and I'm going to say something here. You're apologizing for sending a big paragraph here, but thank you so much,
Oh no.
because I think this makes a huge difference. You have not interrupted the discussion. You actually are the purpose for our discussion. So I
Yes,
thank you for your comment. Thanks so much.
absolutely.
Morgan also brings up this even shows up. So this well, I'm going to read this first and then we'll clarify. This even shows up in queer groups. Sometimes queer groups might not feel safe with you, and you feel invalid if you don't match all their beliefs in their subgroup.
Mm.
Yeah, totally true. I mean, when you don't fit into a social environment, I don't care if that social environment is transgender people, queer people, your Aunt Edna. Yeah, you feel
Mm.
bad. You feel terrible. Um, do you have anything you want to follow on with either of those, Jasmine? I don't. I was going to go on to something.
I mean, I just want to echo with Savo. We want to hear your experience and
Yeah,
your words. Like, so please don't feel like that's interrupting in any way. Absolutely not. It adds depth to the stream. So thank you.
yeah. Thank you.
Um, oh, I don't know. I feel, when you like get a little bit emotional and then your brain's kind of a little bit scattered. That's kind of how
Yeah.
I'm feeling at the moment because it's something that I feel really passionately about. Because when you talk about indoctrination or you talk about teaching gender ideology, yada, yada, you're doing that anyway, but you're teaching it in the way that you view to be acceptable. That the majority of people, because, statistically, we know the majority of people are cisgender and heterosexual.
I
So
suppose.
when we, yeah, with our current understanding, but when we teach that as the only thing, it matches the majority of people enough that they don't have to question themselves a lot. So when they see heterosexual couples on the TV, when they see the different like gendered spaces and things going on in those spaces, most kids are probably going to see that and go, oh, yeah, that they're not even questioning it at all. There's no dissonance there because they relate to what they're seeing. If they see a space that they don't relate to, they're not going to relate to it. It's not harmful for them to see, oh, trans people exist. Oh, okay. It'll be like, fun fact, cool. I'll just put that in the archives and like,
Right.
that's interesting. That's nice to know. That's literally all it is because when you don't relate to an experience, it doesn't take up space in your mind.
No.
If you do relate to an experience, it does. So, for an example, when I was 7, I was on a family trip and I was in this uh, little, what would you call it? Kind of like a unit sort of thing along the water. And I remember every freaking detail of the inside of this place. I remember exactly where it was. I can almost like I could pace the amount of steps to get to the freaking jumping castle outside of the place. And the reason I'm saying this is because when I was watching TV one morning, Kim Petras popped up on the TV.
Wow.
And for those who don't know, Kim Petras is, trans woman, pop star, kind of thing. And she was early on, she was trying to break into the music scene and she was on the morning show on the news talking about her her journey into pop stardom and like trying to break into that field. And of course, they were asking her all about her trans identity. And this was the first time that I saw that trans people actually exist.
Yeah.
And she was talking about, or they were saying, oh, so you're the youngest person currently to have received gender affirming care, I think at that point in Germany, I think it was. And I remember seeing that and it was like burned into my memory,
Sure.
absolutely burned into my memory. When you have an experience that is important, you'll typically remember more parts of that experience because the parts of the brain that it turns on when you're having that experience, it creates a more in-depth memory. So you'll remember more sensory information. It's like, near-death experiences, for example. If someone has a near-death experience, they can probably tell you in very great detail all the bits and pieces that they remember from that.
Right. Right.
Would they be able to tell you that same amount of detail? Say they had a near-death experience 20 years ago. Would they be able to tell you with the same level of detail the breakfast that they had on that day?
Right. Do you know I was going to say that exact same thing? What they ate for breakfast? It's a good question.
Probably not.
It's a good
Probably
question.
not, because it's just, it's what clothes was I wearing
Right. Right.
on like 10 years ago? I've got no freaking
No, of
idea,
course not.
but I can tell you every single freaking detail. I can tell you where the table was, where the couch was, because it triggered like a fight or flight type of thing in
Yeah.
me where I went,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is an important thing to me. Why was it
Yes.
important? I had no idea.
Yeah.
I didn't realize why that was an important thing for me until many years down the track, where I was like, oh, no wonder why that stuck out to me so much.
Right. Right.
But a cisgender heterosexual kid having that exact same experience would go, oh, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Okay, cool. And they'll go on about their life. And then 20 years will pass. And maybe they meet a trans person and they'll go, oh, you must be like that person I saw on TV. And it'll be nothing else. Like that's literally it.
I I want to challenge that just a little bit. In fact, I want to challenge it a whole lot. um,
Oh, okay, okay. We love challenging.
it's right. It's right now. We're already a couple of minutes past the hour. But I want to ask you the question, and maybe this is good for another stream, or a good question for another
Mhm.
stream, because we've already seen there's a relationship between what we learn early in life, the influences we get early in life,
Yeah.
and how we internalize those. And
Mm.
I'm curious if so that means that the social environment there's an influence of social environment on youth, right? And so if you don't ever see a gay couple, if all you ever see on television are heterosexual couples, if you never see a transgender person, you never get these experiences. Does that mean, is it going to be harder or easier for you to believe that those things exist? And you know, I love that you brought up your own story on this, Jasmine. And you said, statistically speaking, we know that more people are cisgender and heterosexual. Do we? Because if we look at, say, ancient Rome was predominantly homosexual because men were taught that women were inferior, including for uses of intimate pleasures. There we go, another stilted, right? They were inferior even for sex, even for pleasure. So if somebody saw a homosexual couple walking down the road in Rome holding hands, if that person was 6 years old, they'd just go, well, yeah, sure. So I
Mm.
guess what I'm trying to say is that, I mean, I don't know if statistically speaking, most people are cisgender and heterosexual, or that most people, statistically speaking, are taught from an early age that not to be cisgender and
Yeah.
heterosexual was wrong. I don't know which is I
Okay,
don't which is the truth
we
there.
do know that.
What?
We do know that from emerging statistics, because this is part of the reason that conservative, like the right conservative, are pushing this idea that it's harmful to teach about gender and
Well,
sexuality
well,
and yada
we're
yada.
we're looking at.
Because
All right.
let me finish here, Emma.
Sure.
Because more recent studies show that, say, like Gen Z people, for example, the rates of being LGBTQIA plus in Gen Zs versus, let's say, boomers
Yeah.
or
Gen X.
even up to like Gen Xers, yep,
Right.
yep, the rates are massively different,
Yes. Right. So
very different.
statistically
And
speaking, are more
so,
people cishet? I don't know that we can say that.
but
Statistically
what's the
speaking, most people have been
causation here?
taught. I think
People
there's a
have this idea that because there's more acceptance coming up, because there's more understanding and people being taught that different types of
right
people
that
exist,
people are
that
becoming
that's the
queer.
reason.
Right. Which
I
I
would
think is
argue that.
totally
I don't think people are becoming queer.
no.
I think people already freaking were, and now they're understanding it. And so they have more acceptance
Yes.
and they
Right.
have people that they can relate to within that experience.
Right. Right. And so I will go on record here. Going on record, I will say this to the camera. It is not harmful to learn about the broad spectrum of the human experience. It is not at all harmful. If it is harmful to be told that there are aspects of the human experience that I might experience are wrong. That's what's
Mhm.
harmful. So
Yeah.
statistically speaking, we can use statistics all day long. And when I was going to stop you, I was going to say, well, statistics of what? Modern Western
Mm.
society? Because,
Just blah. Mm.
sure, when you go,
Also,
well, look,
this is just
most
like,
people today look like most people today. You're like, well, yeah,
yeah, this is
appreciate
like a
A
totally
equals A
random,
there, Aristotle. Thanks a lot. But anyway,
yeah,
sorry.
totally random offshoot.
Go ahead.
My partner, Winter, whenever someone's talking about like ancient Rome and that kind of
Yeah,
thing, she's like, you know what? I don't like when people talk about that or make movies about it and stuff because they make it so heterosexual.
of
And
course.
ancient Rome was so queer.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's just quite funny that a lot of particularly cisgender heterosexual conservative men are like, oh, bring back the days of like the ancient
The
Rome kind of.
gladiators. Right. Right.
And it's like, they don't realize how queer that period of time was. But anyway,
Right. Right. They're asking. I
it's
want to
just a
go
little
to the
funny.
Colosseum, watch somebody get eaten by a lion, have a gladiator come out and poke somebody with a sharp stick, and then go home and perform fellatio and then be penetrated in the bum. That's ancient Rome for you
My
there.
goodness. Yeah, pretty
Well,
much, pretty much. So
telling
that's
you.
quite funny.
Yeah, there
But
you go.
that was just my random offshoot. The other thing that I wanted to say is that I do believe teaching about the broad spectrum of gender identity and sexuality and all of that, not only does it not harm children, it actually allows them to settle into their identity and accept themselves more fully, quicker.
Yes. Yes. Right. Right.
And one of the big scary things is like, oh my gosh, if my kid, like, let's just play the conservative mum, for example. If my kid sees those trans people on the internet, yada yada, it's going to turn them trans. They're going to be confused about their
Right.
identity and they're going to want to get these surgeries. And what if it's, not right for them and bad for them and blah blah blah. And I want to protect them from that. Absolutely. Of course. We want them to grow into their identity, to be comfortable with themselves and to make the right decisions. Of course we
Right.
do.
Right. Right.
And when people have that kind of fear and they see their kid experimenting with different things, for example, am I goth? So I'm going to try out this kind of thing and be like, I'm going to try with the dark hair and the eyeliner, smudgy, blah, blah, blah. This is not a phase, mom. This is who I am. Kids go through those types of things all of the time. And that's trying on different sort of, you know, social sort of things like that. That is distinct from gender. That is not a gender identity. It's not a felt sense of identity in the same way that gender is.
I'm disagreeing a little bit.
Well, actually, I'm disagreeing with myself a little bit here too.
Okay. You're also
The
opening the
point,
door for somebody to say, well, if they're just a phase, how come they can't grow out of their transgender phase? But
mm, some people will. And
oh
that's
yeah,
the
for
point that
sure.
I'm trying to get here
Oh, for
is some
sure.
people might go, oh, let's say for example, if I wasn't trans, if I was like a really feminine boy, then my experience might be, you know, playing around with the idea of, oh, am I trans because I'm really feminine? And then I might try on some of those ideas and try some different clothes and try some different, maybe trying out a name with my social group or whatever, maybe changing my name in that scenario. And then one of two things might happen. I might go, oh, this actually fits me really well. This feels really good for me.
Right.
And I feel much more comfortable and accepted. And I feel really great in that. Fits me like a glove. Awesome. The other experience could be, yeah, I don't know that I I don't hate it. It's whatever, but I don't really feel really meshed with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind my name given at birth, and I think the gender identity, I fit with this a little bit more. Maybe I'm actually just a feminine guy. Both of those are fine.
Sure.
Both of those are completely fine. But a kid isn't going to come to that understanding of themselves if they don't have the freedom to explore their identity.
Right.
We want kids to
We do.
explore their identity sooner
Yeah.
rather than later so that they can develop a strong sense of self quickly
Mm-hmm.
and they can get into early adulthood and go, yep, I feel very confident and comfortable within myself. We don't
Right.
want people getting to the age of 20 freaking 7 or in some cases getting to the age of 45 and then going, oh, shit, I've been living a life that doesn't feel authentic to me. And I didn't even know because I
Right.
never saw that other people exist.
Right. Right.
And that's what's happening when you suppress all this stuff of other people even existing. That is what you are condemning your kids to.
Yes.
It is not this horrible, scary thing for a kid to question their identity. In fact, it's a really beautiful thing because they are the experts on their own identity. They're not going to adopt an identity that doesn't feel right for them. They might try it on and go, is this right for me? I don't know. Like they're trying on a couple of different gloves and seeing what fits them.
Right.
That's a beautiful thing.
Do you, do you know I mean I can actually prove what you just said there. Do you want to know how?
Mm. Please, please.
Because I knew by the time I was 4 years old that I am feminine, but it took until I was 52 years old when I did something about it. But God damn it, I did something about it, right?
Mm.
It never left. It's never going to leave. If you are who you are, and
Yeah,
sooner or later it's going to come out. It's
yeah.
humans learn from the experience by having them. I hope that
Hmm.
came out well. Humans learn from experience when we have experiences. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
Mm.
Um, we're a little bit over. Do you have any final thoughts you want to impart on people? What
So
our
many
major
thoughts.
takeaway? Identity is to be explored, and the sooner you explore it, the sooner you feel better of having explored it.
Mm. Yeah. Give people choices.
Yeah.
Just because you feel a certain way, let's say, like as a parent or an educator or a politician, if you feel a certain way and you think something is, that you feel is right for everyone else, that is actually the harmful thing. Teach people that they can choose their own identity. Religion exists. Yep, we believe this thing and yada yada. Teach kids that, yeah, that exists. They can mesh in with that if they feel aligned with it. And also atheists exist as well, people who, don't believe in religion, people, blah, blah, blah. Um, Heterosexual people exist. That's what this means. And also, gay people exist, bi people exist, trans people exist, blah, blah, blah. You're the expert on your identity. Where do you fit with all of those things?
Yeah.
That is a very beautiful gift that you are able to give your kids. Because just learning about something doesn't change someone into something that they're not. And you already know this. Like, you literally already know this because people are taught about heterosexuality and, cisgender. They're taught about that all the freaking time because it's the cultural norm.
Sure.
And so if that didn't turn me cis and heterosexual, and if it didn't turn Amethyst to cis and heterosexual, and it didn't turn the massive amount of people out there who don't align with that identity into that identity, then we already know that being exposed to different identities doesn't change your identity.
We do.
And just in the way that people will say, oh, well, why don't you, have you tried not being this way? Have you tried, like for you, Amethysta, people will say, well, how do you know? How do you know that you're actually trans? And for you, you can go, well, you know what? I tried on that identity of being cisgender, hetero. I tried on that identity for over 40 years.
For 40 years. Yeah, isn't that long enough?
That's how I know.
Yes. I tried
I
it.
know because I've
It
had
didn't
the
work.
experiences
Yeah.
of both of those, and I know what fits right for me. Trust that your kids have that inner understanding of themselves.
Right.
That's my parting words.
Right.
Trust that the individual knows themselves better than you will ever know them. And that is a scary thing. And it brings up fears. And we want to protect our kids. Of course, we don't want kids to, the straw man argument of go and get bloody surgeries before they're even turning into adults. First of all, it's not happening. There's a lot of checks and balances there, right? But trust that they know themselves better than you ever will, and empower them to explore their identities quickly so that they develop that understanding for themselves.
I agree.
And this is the scary part, particularly for parents.
Right.
Because even for myself, I know that I'm not a parent yet, but if I was a parent, I know that I have this idea of like, oh, I want them to be morally upstanding people, to accept people for who they are and to be blah, blah, blah. And I already feel that if I were a parent and I saw a kid going in ways that were like, they're bullying someone for their identity or whatever, I would be like, oh my gosh, that's horrifying to me. But also, they're an individual. They're going through their own experience. And I can't put my own identity onto them. And that's not what trans people are trying to do. Like, parents, I think, actually probably do this a lot. Can you speak to that, like, as a parent?
Yes, I can. I was gonna say, like, let's bring this up next week. Let's write this down.
Yeah, okay.
Let's write it down and talk about why we do some of these things. Why does our society now wanting to impose Christian ethics, let's say in particular through the government, to regulate morality? I think there's good reasons for it, and I don't think we're going to do it in the next 2 minutes. But let's pick it up next week.
So talking about, say, like tradition and passing on values and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and parenthood and stuff like that. Yeah.
I would love to talk about that.
Right, let's do it.
Because I think it helps people understand that it's not like a horrible thing. Passing on Christian values, for example, that's not a horrible thing. Parents aren't like passing that on because they have this evil agenda about, like, no.
Right.
They want what's best for their kids. And I truly believe that when people bring up this argument about kids needing protection, on some level, they do believe that. And they do believe that they're doing the right thing by the way they're going about it. And we're here to tell you today that maybe have a think about that. Expand your worldview a little bit. Because what we think is right for our kids isn't always right. And I know that any parent with an adult kid, like, can probably look back and go, yeah, I tried to push this thing onto them because I thought that they need to be a doctor. I want them to be
Right.
secure in their job and blah, blah, blah. And they didn't go that route. And that's actually what was best for them.
Yeah.
And they get a little bit of humble pie. So yeah,
Right.
let's talk about that
Yeah. Put a
next
pin in
week.
that. No, I think there's lots to it. So,
Oh, yeah,
well,
awesome.
let me say this anyway. We can obviously talk about this sort of stuff for hours because we came close to doing
Oof.
it. But let's end this here. If you have any requests for a future topic, please let us know. Leave a comment below in the chat here. We just might talk about it next week. Well, maybe not next week because I think we have an idea, but we will talk about it in a future episode and we'll shout you out for the idea. So thank you so much for joining in on this conversation. Um, we think you're all pretty cool for wanting to focus on our shared humanity. So we are sending you lots of love. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining me today. I mean, I guess for the two of us being here together, it sounded like, I don't know where that was
Well,
going.
it's
It sounded
like, thanks
like
for
a
hanging
wedding.
out. Thanks for chatting.
Well, it sounded like a wedding, sort of like this was, thank you for the blessings upon those who are gathered here today to witness these two people not getting married, but actually talking about children either way. So it was a weird thing. I don't know. Stilted
Blessings of the dark moon to you.
blessings. Well,
Hi, kitty cats.
we're actually at about a quarter moon now, but that's beside the point.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
I think we
bye,
just
kitty
hit last
cats.
quarter.
Blessings of the quarter moon to you all. We love you. We think you're awesome. Come and hang out with us next week.
Why do you give me
And
a hard time?
I'm excited. I love doing this. I love chatting about
Definitely.
these things.
So, love to all of you out
Yeah.
there. Margie, I hope you had a great
Well,
session. And thank you to everybody. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Savo. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Jasmine. And Lino, I hope you're having a good, like, teaching thing, whatever he's doing. So, all right. Talk to you guys next week.
bye, everybody. Mwah, 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 mwah.
Bye. Mwah.